Inside Rikers, the escape attempts no one talks about. The Rooftop Run. The night was silent, except for the hum of floodlights. Suddenly, shouts echoed across Rikers Island. 2 inmates, their bodies covered in sweat and dust, had climbed all the way onto a rooftop using a rope made of knotted bedsheets. One of them dangled dangerously as a sheet began to tear apart. Guards below screamed into radios, while searchlights cut through the darkness. For a brief moment, it looked like they might actually make it. The skyline of New York City glittered in the distance, freedom just a jump away. But then the sheet snapped. The crowd of inmates watching from their cells erupted in chaos. Some cheered, others banged on their bars, and guards scrambled toward the scene. What happened next would shock even the most hardened prisoners. But how did they get here? And why has no one heard the full story? The Forgotten Island. Rikers isn't just a jail. It's a world of its own, a place where whispers of freedom turn into dangerous plans. Surrounded by water, locked down with walls, razor wire, and constant surveillance, escaping is almost impossible. Almost. Over the years, countless prisoners have dreamed of breaking free. Some dug tunnels in secret. Others tried disguises, hoping to blend in with staff. Most failed before they even started, but a few came terrifyingly close. One of the boldest plans began with something small, laundry duty. Inmates assigned to wash uniforms noticed how easy it was to slip into the massive bins and roll toward the gates. It sounded crazy, but on Rikers, crazy ideas often became real attempts. For weeks, 2 men rehearsed silently. They studied guard shifts, memorized gate timings, and waited for the right day. And when it came, they climbed inside those bins hidden beneath stacks of dirty clothes. At first, it worked. The carts rolled toward the gates, past officers barely glancing at them. But just as freedom seemed within reach, a guard caught sight of movement inside one of the bins. He shouted. Officers yanked the lid open, revealing a prisoner's terrified face staring back at them. The attempt was over, but that failure only inspired others to try even bigger risks. And that's when the rooftop escape began to take shape, planning in the shadows. Inside one of the cell blocks, a small group of inmates whispered late into the night. Their plan wasn't about hiding in laundry or pretending to be staff. This time, it was about going up straight over the prison walls. The men collected scraps, bedsheets, shoelaces, and pieces of cloth torn from uniforms. Tied together, the sheets formed a rope long enough to dangle from a rooftop. They mapped out guard patrols, even counting the seconds between each flashlight beam. It was risky, but on Rikers, risk was a daily reality. One cold night, the men made their move. They slipped out during recreation, scaling a utility pipe no one thought could hold a human's weight. By the time a guard noticed shadows on the roof, it was already too late. The prisoners were dangling over the edge, their ropes swaying in the night air. And then disaster struck. The sheet rope tore under their weight. One man clung to the edge, screaming. The other plummeted, crashing into the yard below. Sirens roared across Rikers. Guards poured in. The escape was over in seconds. But the legend lived on. Sirens in the yard. The crash of the inmate's body hitting the yard was followed by a chilling silence. Then chaos exploded. Guards rushed in with shields, radios buzzing, while prisoners pressed their faces against the windows, shouting and banging on the bars. The inmate who fell was barely conscious, his leg twisted at an impossible angle. But even in pain, he whispered something to his partner, still clinging to the rooftop edge. "Don't let go." The rooftop man's hand shook. His grip slipped against the cold concrete. The floodlight beam locked on his face, blinding him. "Get down now!" A guard screamed through a bullhorn. But instead of climbing back up, the man tried to swing himself down the rope again, determined to finish what he started. That's when another piece of cloth snapped. The aftermath and the whisper network. The man crashed onto the roof of a lower building, breaking through loose sheet metal with a deafening clang. Guards swarmed the scene, pulling him out in handcuffs. Both escapees were rushed to the prison infirmary, battered but alive. The official report claimed the attempt was unsuccessful and contained quickly, but inside the blocks, a different story spread. Inmates whispered that the men had almost made it, that just a few more feet of rope, and they would have been outside the walls. The story inspired others. Soon, rumors of new plans rippled through the population. Some involved disguises, others bribe guards, and one rumor claimed a group had stolen a set of guard uniforms from a laundry. Most of these whispers were nothing more than talk, but in a place like Rikers, talk could become reality overnight. And one of those whispers turned into the boldest plan of all, escaping to the prison's own chapel. The chapel key. Every Sunday, groups of inmates were escorted into the chapel for services. It was one of the few moments where men from different blocks could gather in the same place. And while most bowed their heads in prayer, a few kept their eyes locked on the back door, the one marked staff only. 2 inmates noticed something strange. The chaplain's assistant always carried a heavy ring of keys. One night, they crafted a crude piece of metal from a cafeteria tray, filing it down against concrete until it resembled a key. They slipped it into their shoe, waiting for the right Sunday. During service, while the choir sang, one inmate faked a fainting spell. As guards rushed to help, the other slipped away toward the back door. His hands trembled as he slid the metal into the lock. For one heart-stopping moment, it turned, the door cracked open. But just as freedom was an arm's reach away, alarms blared. Guards burst through both sides of the chapel, tackling him to the ground as the congregation erupted in chaos. Solitary whispers. The chapel escapee was dragged into solitary, bruised and bloody, but not broken. Locked in the box, he scratched messages into the walls with a piece of wire hidden in his waistband. Other inmates rotated in and out of solitary, reading his words like gospel. He had written down every detail of his attempt. The timing of guard rotations, the weakness of the chapel lock, and even the sound of the alarm delay. It became a manual, passed along secretly. The escape had failed, but the blueprint lived on. One inmate in particular studied it carefully. His idea wasn't to break through doors or climb rooftops. His plan was even more daring. He would escape through the water, the river Gambit. Rikers sits in the East River, surrounded by icy currents and guarded bridges. To the average man, swimming across was suicide, but desperation breeds courage. 2 inmates assigned to outdoor trash duty noticed that garbage containers were wheeled dangerously close to the fence near the shoreline. If they could slip inside and roll past the last checkpoint, the bins would be pushed toward the docks, right where the water lapped against the island's edge. They tested the weight of the lids, the timing of trash pickups, even the strength of the fence. Weeks later, on a foggy morning, they made their move. Inside the bins, heartbeats raced as guards pushed them toward the water. For once, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The bins rattled across the gravel, closer and closer to the edge. Then a guard stopped suddenly. He heard breathing. Slowly, he lifted the lid. 2 pairs of wide eyes stared back at him. A guard betrayal. That failed attempt ended in humiliation. But not all guards were loyal. Some were broken by bribes, others by threats. On Rikers, contraband flowed in because some officers looked the other way, and sometimes they became part of the plan. One story, rarely spoken about, involved a correctional officer who smuggled in civilian clothes for 2 inmates. The idea was simple. Walk out through the staff entrance at shift change. The men put on pressed shirts, ties, and even fake ID badges. Their hearts pounded as they followed the line of officers leaving the island. But as they reached the final gate, one rookie guard noticed something odd. Their shoes. The men wore prison-issue sneakers, not the standard black boots every officer had on. The rookie raised his hand. Stop right there. In seconds, alarms erupted again. The 2 men were pinned to the ground before they could even speak. The betrayal had nearly worked, but the smallest detail had given them away. The tunnel below. By now, escape fever gripped Rikers like a virus. Each failed attempt fueled the next, each legend passed down from tier to tier. This time, the plan was old-fashioned digging. Inmates in a maintenance block began chipping away at the concrete floor with smuggled tools, hiding the noise beneath the roar of industrial fans. Over weeks, they carved a narrow tunnel that snaked beneath the building, packing dirt into bags and scattering in the yard during recreation. They believed they were only feet away from the outer wall. Freedom smelled close. But one night, water began seeping through the dirt. The tunnel had pierced a sewage line. The entire passage flooded in minutes, filling with foul water and rats. The men scrambled out, soaked, coughing, their secret exposed when guards traced the stench to their cell. The dream collapsed, literally drowning before it could ever reach daylight. The kitchen cart. If you worked in the kitchen at Rikers, you had something most inmates didn't: access. Huge food carts rolled in and out of different units every day. Guards checked them, but not carefully enough. 2 inmates came up with a plan to squeeze inside one of the massive rolling carts filled with bread trays. They stripped down to reduce noise, stuffed cloth in their mouths to stay silent, and buried themselves under stacks of loaves. As the cart rattled across the hallway, they held their breath. One guard joked about stealing a piece of bread, lifting a tray from the top. The inmates froze, praying he wouldn't dig deeper. The guard laughed, grabbed his bread, and closed the lid again. The cart rolled forward, closer and closer to the outer gate. And just as the inmates thought they were free, the cart tilted. A wheel caught on a crack in the concrete, spilling trays everywhere. The 2 men tumbled out onto the floor, naked, covered in breadcrumbs, staring up at shocked guards. The entire kitchen staff roared with laughter as the escaped dream died in humiliating fashion. The fire alarm trick. Some escapes relied on chaos. One group realized that during fire alarms, entire blocks were evacuated into open yards before being counted. In that confusion, they believed a man could vanish. They fashioned crude smoke bombs from cleaning supplies, setting them off near electrical panels. The alarm screamed, sprinklers sprayed, and inmates poured into the yard coughing and shouting. One man sprinted straight for the corner, where shadows swallowed the fence. He actually reached it, hands gripping the chain link, feet scrabbling for a hold. But as he began climbing, a spotlight pinned him. Guards tackled him before he could make it halfway. The others were herded back inside, dripping wet, angry that the chaos hadn't been enough. The plan was clever, but it had been too noisy, too obvious. And yet, that attempt planted an idea that would grow into something much darker. What if the chaos wasn't faked? What if it was real? The riot window. Months later, a fight broke out between rival groups in one of the blocks. It spiraled out of control. Tables flipped, fists flew, and guards rushed in swinging batons. In the chaos, 2 inmates grabbed a metal pole and rammed it into a window. The glass shattered, the cold night air rushing in. They scrambled through, slicing their arms on jagged edges, and dropped into a service alley behind the block. For the first time in years, they were outside. Freedom was just walls away. They sprinted through the alley, hearts racing, ignoring the blood dripping from their cuts. They turned a corner, only to find themselves face to face with a squad of officers in riot gear. The fight ended before it began. Both men were beaten, cuffed, and dragged back inside. The window had opened, but not wide enough to let them escape Rikers' grip, the helicopter dream. Every prison has its legends, and Rikers was no different. The boldest rumor of all was that an inmate's girlfriend once plotted to hijack a helicopter and land on the island. Inmates whispered about how she practiced flying in secret, saving money for months to rent a small chopper. The plan was simple: swoop in during yard time, pick up her man, and lift off before guards could react. The story spread like wildfire, fueling fantasies on every tier. But reality crushed the dream. The helicopter never came. The woman was arrested before she even got close, caught bragging about the plan to the wrong person. Still, the legend lived on, adding fuel to the fire that maybe, just maybe, someone could beat Rikers one day. The garbage truck gamble. Outside contractors came onto Rikers daily. Garbage trucks, supply vans, delivery drivers. For inmates with sharp eyes, those vehicles meant opportunity. One group convinced a worker to leave a truck unlocked while they helped with trash duty. The plan was bold: slip in the back of the truck, bury themselves beneath bags of refuse, and ride straight off the island. The moment came. 2 men climbed in, gagging at the smell, holding their noses as bags of rotten food buried them. The truck rumbled forward, rolling through the gates. Their hearts pounded. Freedom was just a short drive away. Then the driver hit the brakes. Officers waved the truck down. It was routine inspection day. Guards climbed aboard, poking through the piles of trash. And then an arm twitched. Within minutes, both men were dragged out, smeared in garbage, coughing humiliated. The garbage truck plan ended exactly where it began, in filth, the guard uniform heist. Some inmates believed disguise was the only way out. The laundry room became their target, where guard uniforms were washed and folded. A team managed to steal 2 sets, hiding them beneath their mattresses. They practiced walking like officers, mimicking the swagger and posture they saw every day. The night of their attempt, they dressed in crisp uniforms, tucking in their shirts, adjusting their caps, and carrying clipboards like real staff. They made it to the first checkpoint, nodding to an officer who barely glanced at them. Their confidence grew until the second gate. The officer there demanded IDs. They froze, stammering. They handed over fake badges crudely drawn with ink. The officer laughed. Then he radioed in backup. The guards were taken down on the spot, their uniforms ripped from their backs. The lesson spread quickly. At Rikers, clothes might fool the eye, but not the gate. The infirmary plot. Sickness was a ticket out of the block. Some prisoners faked chest pains, coughing blood with packets of ketchup hidden in their mouths. The goal? A trip to the infirmary, where security was looser. One inmate went further. He bribed a medical orderly to leave a side door unlocked. The plan was set: collapse in the yard, get carried to the infirmary, slip through the side exit, and vanish into the night. On the chosen day, he dropped to the ground, clutching his chest. Guards rushed him to the infirmary. Just as planned, the side door was open. He darted through it, sprinting down a narrow hallway, lungs burning with hope. At the end, freedom. But instead of an exit, he crashed straight into a steel gate, padlocked from the outside. The orderly betrayed him, tipping off the officers for extra pay. Guards dragged him back to his cell, where other inmates muttered bitterly about snitches in white coats. The boat beneath the bridge. Escape fever burned hottest among those assigned to bridge maintenance. From the island, one narrow bridge connects Rikers to Queens. Beneath it, the river churns with swift currents. 2 inmates, both former fishermen, came up with a wild plan: build a raft from smuggled barrels and stash it under the bridge during repair duty. At night, they'd climb down, untie the raft, and drift away under the cover of darkness. For weeks, they managed to hide the makeshift raft. Then came the night. They lowered themselves carefully, climbing into the wobbling barrels. The river swallowed them as they pushed off, grinning at their ingenuity. But halfway across, the raft capsized. The current ripped one man away instantly, sweeping him downstream. The other clung to a barrel, screaming until searchlights pinned him. The river had promised freedom, but delivered only another cage. The library exit. Rikers had a law library where inmates prepared their cases, flipping through dusty books under watchful eyes. But the library also had something more tempting: a side service door rarely used with a rusting lock. 2 inmates hatched a plan. During late-night sessions, they studied not just books but the hinges of that door. They smuggled in a sharpened spoon, bending and filing it until it worked like a makeshift key. On the chosen night, as guards nodded off in the corner, one man slipped to the door. His hands shook as the spoon turned and the lock clicked open. The cold draft of freedom swept in. He motioned to his partner, ready to slip out into the dark. But just as he pulled the door wide, another door slammed behind them. Guards stormed in. The whole thing had been a setup. Someone had snitched. The prisoners were tackled to the floor, their key clattering across the tiles. The laundry chute. In the laundry rooms of Rikers, clothes weren't just washed. They were transported through massive metal chutes. To some, those shafts looked like escape tunnels. One wiry inmate, small enough to fit, decided to test it. He stripped down, greased his body with soap, and slid feet first into the chute. For seconds, it worked. His body shot down like a bullet, rattling against metal. But instead of freedom, he landed hard in a locked basement bin. The chute had no exit, just a trap where sheets piled high. When guards opened the bin hours later, they found him shivering, covered in soap, and too exhausted to resist. The laundry chute became a cautionary tale. Not every hole leads out. The ceiling crawl. Another group focused upward. They'd notice weak panels in the ceiling above their block. If they could push through and crawl along the beams, maybe they could reach an outer wall. One night, 2 inmates climbed their bunks, forcing open a panel. Dust and insulation rained down as they wriggled into the crawl space. The smell of rats filled their lungs as they moved inch by inch in the dark. For hours they crawled. Finally, a faint glow appeared ahead. Moonlight through a vent. They smiled, thinking they were close. But when they pushed the vent open, instead of fresh air, they dropped straight into the officer's control room. Guards stared up in shock as the 2 filthy men fell at their feet. The crawl had ended in the worst possible place. The stolen boat motor. Inmates assigned to maintenance near the docks noticed something unusual. An old boat used by staff sat chained but often unattended. If they could steal its motor, they might turn debris into a working raft. They worked for weeks, smuggling out metal scraps, fashioning a makeshift hull from barrels, and hiding it in weeds near the shoreline. One night, they finally stole the boat motor, dragging it to their contraption. The motor roared to life, churning water. They pushed off, laughing as the prison lights shrank behind them. But the noise gave them away instantly. Towers lit up, sirens wailed, and patrol boats sped after them. Within minutes, their raft was ripped apart by waves, and they were hauled back in chains. The attempt was bold, but too loud for an island that never sleeps. The courtroom van. Some believed the only way off the island was through official transport. Court vans carried inmates daily to Manhattan. Shackled in chains, they rode past freedom, streets, people, the city skyline. One man studied those rides for months. He noticed how guards grew lazy, how shackles sometimes hung loose. One morning, as the van rumbled across the bridge, he twisted his wrist free. Quietly, he unlocked his waist chain with a smuggled pin. By the time the van reached Queens, he was unshackled. When it slowed at a red light, he lunged at the door, kicking it open, tumbling onto the street. For one glorious second, he was free, running barefoot across traffic. But NYPD patrol cars were never far from Rikers vans. Within moments, he was tackled on the asphalt, sirens wailing all around him. He'd made it further than most, but only for a heartbeat. The rooftop distraction. One block of inmates noticed that during storms, the guards' attention shifted. Flooded hallways, flickering lights, and radio static created rare blind spots. A small group decided to use a thunderstorm as cover. While lightning split the sky, 2 inmates started a fake fight in the mess hall, drawing guards inside. At the same time, another climbed a pipe toward the roof. Rain soaked his hands, but he kept climbing, reaching the edge where barbed wire glistened. He wrapped his jacket around the wire and began forcing his way through. Just then, a flash of lightning illuminated him in plain sight. A tower guard spotted the movement, fired a warning shot into the air, and floodlights swept across the roof. The escape ended there, the store betraying him instead of hiding him. The food truck switch. Contractors bringing food into Rikers often left their trucks near the gates. One day, 2 inmates working in the kitchen spotted an open truck bed filled with crates of produce. Their plan was simple: slip inside the crates and ride out unnoticed. On the chosen day, they climbed in, curled tight under boxes of lettuce and apples. The truck engine roared, rolling toward the exit. Hearts hammered with every bump. At the gate, guards made their usual cursory check, until one noticed juice dripping from the crates. He lifted a box and saw a hand. Within seconds, the men were dragged out, crates crashing around them. The produce escape ended as quickly as it began, with laughter echoing from both guards and inmates alike. The ferry plot. The Rikers Island ferry was one of the most tempting targets. It carried staff and visitors back and forth each day, passing within arm's reach of the outside world. One inmate befriended a ferry worker, bribing him with commissary and outside connections. The plan was bold. During a busy boarding, the inmate would slip into a storage compartment, hiding until a boat left the island. The day came. He vanished into the compartment, clutching his breath as footsteps echoed above. The ferry departed. For the first time, he was truly off Rikers. But when the boat docked, officers were already waiting. The worker had betrayed him, reporting the scheme in exchange for leniency on his own charges. Dragged out in chains, the inmate screamed he'd been seconds away from freedom. The fake medical transfer. Medical transfers often took inmates to outside hospitals, with looser security than Rikers. One clever prisoner faked a severe illness, collapsing repeatedly until doctors demanded an outside scan. During transport, he studied every detail, how the shackles were locked, which officers carried weapons, even the route to the hospital. On the return trip, as the van slowed near a red light, he made his move, slamming his chains into the guard's face, forcing the van door open with a desperate kick. He hurled himself into traffic, rolling across asphalt. For seconds, horns blared and cars swerved around him. He sprinted barefoot toward an alley, freedom within reach. But the sound of boots thundered behind him. Officers tackled him just steps from the corner. He had been close, painfully close, but the city swallowed him back into Rikers' grip. The storm drain crawl. Beneath Rikers lay storm drains, dark, narrow, filled with filth. Inmates assigned to maintenance whispered about using them like tunnels. 2 men pried open a grate, slipping inside during a shift. They crawled through the stinking water, rats scurrying around them. The drains twisted like a maze, each turn leading deeper. Finally, they saw faint moonlight ahead. Freedom was close, but as they crawled toward it, they were blinded by flashlights. Guards stood above the grate, waiting. Their entire crawl had been monitored. Rikers already had sensors in the drains. The men were pulled out, filthy and defeated, their escape plan drowned in sewage. The tower bribe. Not all escapes relied on stealth. One inmate believed money was stronger than walls. His family on the outside scraped together thousands, offering it to a tower guard in exchange for looking the other way. For weeks, the plan seemed set. The guard nodded, took the bribe, and promised a blind eye. On the chosen night, the inmate sprinted across the yard, climbing the fence under the watchtower's gaze. But as he reached the top, gunshots cracked the air, warning shots. The guard hadn't betrayed the prison. He had betrayed the inmate. The man froze, hands gripping wire, before being dragged down by officers. The betrayal spread to the prison like poison. No guard could ever be trusted. The air vent crawl. Some inmates noticed that the massive air vents running through Rikers connected different blocks. One wiry prisoner decided he could crawl through the ducts, slipping from one unit to another, and eventually closer to the outside walls. He stripped down to fit inside, wrapping himself in grease to move faster. The metal groaned as he dragged his body forward, rats squealing in the dark. For hours he crawled, his heart pounding at every echo of footsteps above. Finally, he saw light. A vent cracked open to the outside. Freedom. But when he kicked it loose and slid forward, he didn't fall into the streets. He dropped straight into the yard, surrounded by guards and spotlights. His great escape had carried him in a full circle, right back inside Rikers. The hidden mattress. In one of the transport areas, inmates noticed how mattresses were loaded for disposal. Flat, heavy, and stacked high, they offered perfect cover. One man squeezed inside a mattress by carving out the foam, sealing himself in like a coffin. He was loaded with the rest onto a truck bound for the landfill. The ride jolted his body, suffocating him in darkness, but his mind swirled with visions of freedom. When the truck reached the disposal site, workers sliced open the mattresses and jumped back in shock when a man gasped for air inside one. Instead of freedom, he was dumped in front of correctional officers, his plan literally cut open. The fake firefighter. During one emergency drill, firefighters entered Rikers to simulate a blaze. Their uniforms, helmets, and tools fascinated inmates. One man secretly sketched the uniforms and later pieced together a disguise from scraps, orange cloth for reflective stripes, a stolen helmet, and even a fake oxygen tank made of painted soda cans. He waited for a real fire alarm. When it rang, he dressed and walked in line with the firefighters, blending into the chaos. For a brief moment, he marched toward the gate with absolute confidence, but his stride gave him away. He didn't move like a trained firefighter. He moved like an inmate. Guards spotted the mistake, Yanking the helmet from his head, his disguise crumbled in seconds. The rooftop hostage, one of the most violent attempts, came when desperate inmates decided they needed leverage. During recreation, they ambushed a guard, forcing him onto the roof at knife point. Spotlights swiveled, sirens blared, and negotiators screamed through bullhorns. The inmates demanded a helicopter, threatening to throw the guard off the roof if their demands weren't met. For hours, a standoff gripped the island. Prisoners inside cheered, while officers outside readied rifles. Then, in a sudden rush, tactical teams stormed the roof. Flashbangs exploded, disorienting everyone. Shots rang in the air. The guard was dragged to safety, and the inmates were beaten into submission. The rooftop hostage attempt ended in blood, but became one of the most feared escape legends inside Rikers. The Chapel Tunnel. Years after the Chapel Key attempt failed, another group of prisoners revived the idea, but this time with digging. Underneath the chapel's wooden floors, they found soft soil. Using stolen spoons, broom handles, and scraps of metal, they dug night after night, covering the hole with rugs when services began. The tunnel grew, stretching outward. Whisper networks called it the way out. But one night, guards noticed the chapel's floor sagging. They ripped up the boards and discovered the gaping hole beneath. The inmates were caught red-handed, dirt still under their nails. The tunnel collapsed the same night, buried forever. The deadly bridge run. The most infamous escape attempt at Rikers happened during a transfer. Shackled inmates were being moved across the bridge toward Queens when one man broke free. He sprinted onto the open roadway, chains rattling, traffic swerving around him. Guards fired warning shots into the air as horns blared from cars. The man dodged through headlights, blood streaking from his wrists. For a moment, he almost made it to the far side, the city lights shimmering like salvation. Then, a patrol tackled him hard onto the asphalt. In the chaos, another inmate tried to run too, only to be struck by a speeding car. The escape ended in tragedy, with one dead and the other dragged back in cuffs. The legacy of failure. Every escape attempt at Rikers ended the same way. Failure, betrayal, or blood, yet the legends lived on. Prisoners passed the stories from tier to tier, each attempt fueling the next, each failure sparking new ideas. Rikers Island remains one of the hardest places in America to break free from. The walls, the water, the towers, they all work together to keep men trapped. But the spirit of escape never dies. And somewhere in the whispers of the cells tonight, another plan is already being born. The island that swallows freedom. From bedsheet ropes snapping in the night, to tunnels collapsing beneath chapel floors, to desperate sprints across the bridge that ended in tragedy, every escape attempt at Rikers tells the same story. No one truly gets out. The island is a trap built not just with walls, wire, and guards, but with the weight of fear itself. Every inmate who tried left behind a legend, whisper in the dark cells, keeping alive the hope that maybe one day someone will succeed. But the truth is darker. Rikers doesn't just hold men, it breaks them. Each failed attempt is a reminder that freedom, though visible just across the water, is still out of reach. And yet, the whispers never stop. Because inside Rikers, the dream of escape is the one thing no walls can cage.